Hey everybody, welcome to the explanation video for the Kaplan pretest. Now, if you do have the Kaplan book in front of you, I have to admit that the test is not exactly the same as the Kaplan book. I have added a few questions, and I think generally what I see in these practice exams is they don't really test the scientific method. That idea of observing, making a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, drawing a conclusion, it's not in many of the practice tests. Also, looking at valid hypothesis and what is a weakness in the experimental design, identifying the independent variables and the dependent variables. I think all of these areas are quite weak in the majority of the practice exams, and that's probably a reflection that the old GED exam didn't really look at this area very much. It's the new GED exam that really brings it in. And so I think as we do these last few practice tests, I will keep trying to add a few questions into the middle to practice these key skills. But let's have a look at the exam together. Question 1 says, which of the following would be a good title for this passage? Whenever you're asked what is a good title for the passage, you're basically asked what is the main idea. A title needs to be specific, but not too detailed. It needs to be the main idea. So if you're doing 6-way, if you're doing the academic reading, you might think about the main idea, the broad idea, and the narrow idea. Well, you're looking for the main idea. So answer A, the advantage and the disadvantage of life near the hydrothermal vents. So A has this idea of advantage and disadvantage, and life, living near the hydrothermal vents. B, hydrothermal vents, a potential fuel source for our energy-hungry economy. Or C, hydrothermal vents suggest that all life is solar powered, everything comes from the sun. Or D, major 20th century advances in oceanography, the study of the ocean. Now, if you look at these answers, you might notice that hydrothermal vent is in answer A, B, and C. D just talks about advances generally. So if hydrothermal vent is in several of the paragraphs, then we can take away answer D for being too broad. And then we're only looking at A, B, and C. A also is quite specific, the advantage and the disadvantage. So does it show you the positive and the negative? As we read the passage, we need to be thinking about these questions. For many years, scientists believed that all living things depended on sunlight for their energy. For example, human beings derive energy from food. Our food comes either from plants that require sunlight or from animals which eat plants that require sunlight. So, this is about taking energy from the sun. However, in the 1970s, scientists discovered that hot springs called hydrothermal vents in the ocean floor. So we do have hydrothermal vents here, and the vents continue in the next few sentences and also in the next paragraph. So we can take away answer D. And the vents are miles below the surface of the ocean, far beyond the reach of sunlight. Yet, these vents are surrounded by fascinating life forms, including giant red tubworks, eyeless shrimp, hair-looking crabs, communities of bacteria that grow like carpets on the floor. So these are all different organisms that live near the thermal vent. This is not the advantage and the disadvantage, it's just a description. Those bacteria feed on the minerals like sulfur that flow upward through the vents. The bacteria use a process called chemiosynthesis to turn the minerals into nutrition. The bacteria in turn are eaten by many of the animals that live near the vents. Thus, those animals take in a source of energy that does not derive from sunlight. So, not all life is solar panel. Not all life depends on the sun. C looks like a good answer. Now, this is a description, and the other paragraph is also a description of how they get their food. There's nothing positive or negative about living there. Not it's more difficult, not it's more easy. There's nothing positive or negative. So we take away answer A. And there's nothing about us using the hydrothermal vents to get energy. This is about the organisms that live there using the hydrothermal vents to get energy. So the answer has to be C. Number 2, also on the same passage, which is the following is a detail that supports the main idea of the passage. Well, the main idea was that not everything gets its energy from the sun, and it's stated there in the final conclusion. A, many scientists believe that all living creatures depend on sunlight for their energy, but the conclusion is not everything depends on the sunlight. Not everything. This idea was in the past. For many years, scientists believed that, but not today. B, hydrothermal vents were not discovered until the 1970s. Well, that is true. It's from the second paragraph. They did discover the hydrothermal vents in the 1970s. So whilst A is false, B is true, but does it support the main idea of some animals not getting energy from the sun? I'm not sure that it does. C, the hairy-looking crabs covered in structures that enable them to catch tiny particles of food. Well, it says that they are hairy-looking crabs. It does not say that that helps them to catch any food. So this would be a not given answer. It's not supporting the main idea of the passage. D, no sunlight penetrates to the world of the hydrothermal ocean vents. So if there's no sunlight and there are animals, those animals cannot depend on the sunlight. So D would be the best answer. Number 3, which of the following restates Marie Curie's hypothesis about pitchblende? Pitchblende contains uranium. Uranium interacts with the non-radioactive elements in pitchblende to increase its radioactivity, and that is with the non-radioactive elements. Polonium was discovered by the Curies as a result of their experiment. Our pitchblende contains an element that is more radioactive than uranium. A hypothesis, remember, is a guess. Something that is not stated, something that is not proven true or false straight away, but a guess about what happens. So what did Marie Curie think? In a radioactive element like uranium, atoms give off some of their particles. In the 19th century, chemist Marie Curie discovered that the radioactivity of a compound depends on the amount of radioactive elements it contains. So the radioactivity depends on the number of radioactive elements. That's an important idea, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Then Curie noticed something strange. Pitchblende, a compound that contains radioactive uranium, gives off more radiation than pure uranium. So why is there more radiation than pure uranium? So something is increasing the amount of radiation that's being given off. And remember, the radioactivity depends on the amount of radioactive element it contains. Curie wondered. She thought why that would be the case. She guessed. Now, guess is a way of saying predict, and predict is a way of saying hypothesize. So, pitchblende might contain another element that was even more radioactive than uranium. So, pitchblende contains an element that is more radioactive than uranium. The correct answer is D. Which of the following is a reasonable conclusion based on the Curie's experiment? Pitchblende is more radioactive than pure uranium because it contains polonium. Polonium is only one of many reasons why pitchblende is more radioactive than pure uranium. Marie Curie would become famous, or the Curies were not the first physicists to isolate polonium. Now, to find out, Curie and her husband isolated the elements that make up pitchblende. After isolating each element, so separating them and making them alone, they measured each element's radioactivity. As a result of this process, the Curies discovered that pitchblende contains a highly radioactive element which no one else had identified before. They called it polonium. Nobody else had identified this before, so they gave it a name. So they were the first physicists to isolate polonium. Answer D is false. C is not really a conclusion about the experiment. It's a conclusion about the person. So that's not relevant. So A or B. Is pitchblende more radioactive because it contains polonium, or is this only one of many reasons? Well, they discovered that pitchblende contains polonium. It doesn't say that they discovered many different things. It says that they discovered pitchblende contained polonium. So answer A would be the best answer. Number 5. Which evidence from the passage supports the conclusion that CFCs remain in the atmosphere for some time after their use? Remain there after people stop using them. The ozone layer started thinning decades ago. The hole in the ozone layer reached its largest size after the CFCs were banned from production and use. Well, after they were banned, it continued to get bigger. That might mean that B is the correct answer, because this is about after they've been stopped. CFCs are used both in aerosols and as refrigerants, and CFCs absorb medium frequency ultraviolet light. Now, most of these answers do look true, but we are trying to find something that supports the idea that CFCs remain in the atmosphere even after they have been used. So let's have a look. The ozone layer is a part of the upper atmosphere where high concentrations of ozone, a form of oxygen. The ozone layer absorbs between 97% and 99% of the sun's medium frequency ultraviolet light. So see, the ozone absorbs the ultraviolet light, and the ultraviolet light can cause skin damage and even skin cancer. And it's for that reason that if you see a golowa go outside in Thailand and Myanmar in the hot season, they might go red. That's the ultraviolet light's effect. For this reason, the depletion of the ozone layer is a potentially global health risk. The ozone layer has been decreasing in thickness for decades due to atmospheric pollution. Well, it started thinning, it started decreasing in thickness. This is true, but this is not about the CFCs, so it's not relevant. In particular, chlorofluorocarbons, which are CFCs, used in aerosols and refrigerators. Well, again, answer C is true, but it does not link to the atmosphere this time. So there's no link to the atmosphere. It cannot be answer C. Well, these were so harmful that the ozone layer, that a global ban was implemented in 1994, and production had almost entirely ceased by 2004. However, this ban was not effective. The hole in the ozone layer that appeared over Antarctica reached its largest size in 2006. So even though they stopped being used in 2004, the hole got bigger until 2006. That suggests that even after people stopped using them, they remained in the atmosphere. That's why answer B is correct. Now, which of the following additional pieces of evidence would best counter the author's opinion that the ban on CFCs was not effective? Well, it says the ban was not effective because the hole in the ozone layer got to the biggest size in 2006. Well, which would counter that argument? Which would be against that argument? A, the ozone hole is not literally a hole, but rather an area in which the ozone layer is depleted by more than 50%. Well, ban was not effective is something that is negative. We're looking for something that might be positive or prove that it was effective. A is showing the size of the problem. It's not showing that the ban was useful or not useful. B, while the ozone layer continues to thin, it is thinning at a rate much lower than in the past. This looks good. In the past, it might have been going at 10 units per year. Now it is only going at 3 units per year. So if the speed of destruction has slowed down, then the ban on the use of CFCs could be argued to be useful. That's why the answer is B. Skin cancer rates near the equator far from Antarctica have not changed significantly since 1994. Well, that doesn't really explain about whether the ban was useful or not. D, the CFC ban contains a few extremely narrow exceptions for uses where no suitable replacement exists, like fire suppression systems on aeroplanes. I mean, this is explaining about the ban, but this is not explaining if it was useful or not useful. It's just explaining how wide the ban on CFCs is. B is a good reason why the ban has been successful. It has slowed down the destruction of the ozone layer. So B is the correct answer. Which answer choice describes the process in the equation ATP plus H2O goes to AMP plus PPI? So we're looking for PPI, ATP. We are looking at the second one, not the first one. We're looking at the second one. We match the AMP and the PPI, the AMP and the PPI. Well, let's look at the passage. Adenosine triphosphate is one of the most important chemicals for the function of all known living organisms. It stores and transports energy within and between the cells. When a cell needs to use this energy, a chemical reaction releases it. Adenosine triphosphate and water can combine to remove either a single phosphate or pyrophosphate, which is 2 P's, from the ATP, leaving either adenosine diphosphate or adenosine monophosphate. Well, we have monophosphate here. We can see that. So what has happened in this? We have removed pyrophosphate and we have been left with adenosine monophosphate. So let's have a look. A, adenosine triphosphate is transported from one part of the cell to another. Well, this does not mean transported, this means changed. This is a chemical reaction. It's not about the transportation of ATP. Adenosine triphosphate is broken down, yes, into adenosine monophosphate, yes, and a pyrophosphate, yes. Releasing energy? Possibly. Releasing the energy? Yes, because energy is released. We see here 10.9 kilocalories is released. So B looks like a good answer. C, adenosine monophosphate is broken down into water, but the adenine monophosphate is the AMP. This is a product, not a reaction. So this is what is being made, not what is being broken down. Answer C is not correct. D, adenosine monophosphate stores energy which is transported to another cell. Again, we're not talking about transportation, we're talking about a chemical reaction. When we have equations, we're talking about chemical reactions. So answer B is correct. Which of the following chemicals plays a role most similar to that of ATP? Well, ATP can be broken down to release energy. So lactase is broken down into lactose sugar for easier digestion. It's not about easier digestion, it's about releasing energy. B, DNA, which is in the nucleus of every cell, contains instructions to manufacture proteins. We are not looking at the making of proteins, we are looking at the release of energy. C, hemoglobin, which allows the red blood cells to carry oxygen. We're not looking at transportation, we are looking at the production of energy or the release of energy. We can see that here, and we can see in the passage it says when a cell needs to use energy. So we have to have something in the answer that is about releasing or using energy. D, glycogen, which stores sugars, can be broken off in differing amounts when the body needs energy. So there is a store of sugar, and you should know that sugar is energy. It can be broken down in differing amounts. Here we have 1 or 2 broken off. So it can be broken down in different amounts when the body needs energy. And the key is the body needs energy, and this is all about releasing energy. So answer D is correct. Now we have a genetics question. This question is a little bit different because we have 2 Punnett squares. Normally, we only have 1 Punnett square. And if this was not there and you only had 1 Punnett square, maybe you would find this question very easy because we've practiced many times. However, this question is a little bit different. Let's read the passage. An equal number of seeds are produced from each of 2 pairs of flowers. That's why we have 2 Punnett squares, because we have 2 pairs of flowers. So we have flower 1 and flower 2 and flower 3 and flower 4. Okay, they're very bad pictures of flowers. But we have 2 pairs of flowers. So a pair is 2 and we have 2 pairs. So in total we have 4 flowers. But we get an equal number of seeds from each one. So maybe we get 100 seeds from here and we get 100 seeds from here. We get an equal number of seeds from each one. One pair is purebred pink plant with dominant genes, and a purebred white plant with recessive genes. So we have the pure pink dominant, we have the pure white recessive. The other pair is made up of 2 hybrids. So both of them are pink, but they both carry the recessive gene for white. The Punnett squares above show all the possible combinations of alleles for the 2 pairs. If a seed is selected at random from the offspring of those 2 pairs, what is the probability that the seed selected will grow to be white? So if we add all of the seeds together from all of the plants, so that's half from the first pair and half from the second pair, what is the probability that it will be white? Well, let's have a look. This one has a P, so it will be pink. This one has a dominant P, so it will be pink. In fact, all of these will be pink. They will all be hybrids, but they will all be pink. This one will be homozygotic. It will be pink and it will not be carrying any white. This one and this one are the same as the first pair. They are hybrids. They have one dominant allele for pink and so they will both end up being pink. The only one that has two recessive genes, two recessive alleles, is this one. This one will be white, but it is the only one. So we have 1 out of 8 that will be white. The correct answer is A. Don't let something like this confuse you. You know how to find the genotypes of offspring. You know how to decide what the phenotype will be. This time you had 2 sets of parents. That just means that you're looking at 8 different possibilities instead of 4 different possibilities. Then number 10, a ball was dropped onto a surface from different heights, and the height of the first bounce was recorded. The graph above illustrates the initial height. The drop height is the initial height, and the bounce height, which is the dark grey, the bounce height of the 6 trials in the experiment. What was the average, the arithmetic mean difference between the drop height and the first bounce height in feet? This is 5. We can say 1, 2, 3. This will be 4. So 5 minus 4, we have a difference of 1. Again, 5 and 4, so we have a difference of 1. This is 10, 9, 8. So we have a difference of 2. And I think we have 10, 9, 8, 7. So we have a difference of 3. And this one, well, 10, 20 to 15 is 5. And then I think we have one more. We could go like this. This would be 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. So this is 1. So we have a difference of 6. And then on this one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a difference of 8. So if we add all of these up, we have 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 6 plus 8. And in total, we have 6 drops. So we need to divide by 6. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 2 is 4, plus 3 is 7, plus 6 is 13, plus 8 is 21. So 21 divided by 6. And that would give us the answer 3.5. So the answer is B, 3.5. Question number 11. Which of the following is implied by the paragraph and the diagram? So we're looking at the paragraph and the diagram together. We have a picture of a neuron. The short paragraph, a neuron is the basic functional unit of the nervous system. Neurons transmit information throughout the body. So neurons carry messages around the body. A, neurons are part of the endocrine system. Well, no. They are part of the nervous system, not the endocrine system. B, oxygen is carried throughout the body by the neurons? No, they transmit information. They send messages, not oxygen. Answer D, nerve impulses travel from the axon to the cell body, but the cell body is this part here, and we can see the arrow going in this direction, and this is the axon. So the messages go from the cell body to the axon, not from the axon to the cell body. D is the wrong way round. Now, what do we have here? We have muscle. So we have muscle fiber. Neurons transmit instructions regarding muscles to the muscles. Or neurons transmit instructions regarding movement to the muscles, things that the muscle needs to do. So C is the correct answer. Based on a paragraph, which of the following statements is an opinion rather than a fact? Now, for opinions, we should be looking for adjectives, things about the future that cannot be proven, the word should. So A, comets are small bodies of ice and dust. That's what they're made from. That should be a fact. The orbit of a comet has an elliptical shape. That's the shape. We can describe the shape. That can be proven true or false. Comets release gas and dust as they approach the sun. Comets were formed when the solar system was born. Now, we don't have any opinions there necessarily. We don't have any should. We don't have any predictions about the future. We don't really have many adjectives. So we do need to go and look at the passage. One other way that we can see an opinion is where we see that one group believe. If it says some argue or some believe or some think, thinking, believing, arguing, this is showing one group's opinion. At a basic level, two girls, they might argue about a boy. One girl says the boy is handsome, the other girl says the boy is ugly. They have different ideas. Here, some scientists believe that the comets were formed when the solar system was born. So the correct answer is D. That's the other thing to look for with opinions. What one group of people think, but another group does not agree. Next question. Which of the following is an example of a photochemical reaction? So let's think, what is a photochemical reaction? In a photochemical reaction, light starts the reaction. Light can start a chemical reaction by exciting atoms and molecules, making them unstable, and more likely to react with other atoms and molecules. But the key there is that the light begins the reaction. So A, polymerization, in which long-chain organic compounds are formed from repeating units called monomers. There is nothing about light. Fractional distillation, in which various petroleum products are separated out of crude oil. There is nothing about light. Neutralization, in which an acid and a base react to form a salt and a water. There is nothing about light. Photosynthesis, in which green plants use the energy from sunlight to make carbohydrates, form water and carbon dioxide. The reaction is started by the energy from the sunlight. Light starts the reaction. Answer D must be correct. In question 14, what is the function of the hormone thyroxine? So we should find thyroxine in the table. After we find thyroxine in the table, we can go across. Thyroxine regulates the metabolism and growth. Metabolism is all the reactions in the body, the breaking down and the building up. So thyroxine controls the speed of the breaking down and building up reactions, and it controls growth. Now, female secondary sex characteristics, these would be estrogen. Male secondary sex characteristics, these would be testosterone. Speeding up. Now we see speeding up, and we might think metabolism, that's speeding up. But speeding up the pulse and breathing rate for the fight or flight. Flight and fight are part of adrenaline. D, it helps control the metabolism and growth. We can match metabolism and growth to the table, so we know answer D must be correct. Question 15, also on the same table. People who have one form of the disease, diabetes mellitus, do not produce enough insulin. So insulin is here in the pancreas, and it controls the blood sugar level. Based on the chart, what is the general effect of this disease? So it must be something about blood sugar level. Stunted growth, that's not about how much sugar is in the bloodstream. Excess growth, again, that's not about how much sugar is in the bloodstream. These would be the growth hormone in the pituitary gland. Overproduction of estrogen, well, that would be the ovaries. It's not about insulin, so it's not going to be C. Uncontrolled blood sugar levels. Uncontrolled means sometimes there might be too much sugar in the bloodstream, which can cause a problem for the body. Other times there might not be enough, so the body might not have enough energy. The level of the blood sugar would not be controlled. It would not be regulated. Remember, the word regulate means to control. So answer D is correct. Paul, a child who was not growing as rapidly as he should, was given growth hormone to stimulate his growth. That makes sense. Growth hormone helps to grow. Paul anticipated that the hormone would enable him to reach an adult height of over 6 feet, even though his parents are both below the average height. In fact, Paul's adult height was 5 feet 7 inches. What was wrong with Paul's thinking? Well, let's look at C and D. In order to grow over 6 feet, Paul would have to take insulin too, or he would have to take testosterone too. Well, testosterone is a male sex hormone. Women can be over 6 feet. That wouldn't make sense. Insulin controls the amount of blood sugar. That's not about growth. C and D do not control the height that a person grows to, so we can remove C and D easily. Now let's look at A and B. Growth hormone is only one of several factors that affect a person's height. That's possible. Growth hormone, when administered as a drug, does not affect a person's height. Well, we don't know. It naturally occurs in the body and it does control growth. We have no information about what happens when it's injected instead of occurring naturally. That means administered as a drug. We don't know what happens when it is administered as a drug. But we do have a clue that both the parents are below average height. So that suggests that the height might be partly to do with genetics, partly to do with the pituitary gland not producing enough of the growth hormone, but also partly due to genetics. The cells do not have the blueprint for being over 6 feet. There are several factors that would affect the person's height. So answer A is correct. An emulsion is a mixture of two liquids whose particles are scattered evenly in one another without dissolving. Emulsions are unstable. After a time, the liquids separate. So an emulsion begins when two liquids are mixed together. The particles are evenly separated, but because they are not dissolved, they will separate again. They will not stay mixed together. Which of the following is an emulsion? Well, tea with sugar. Sugar is a solid, not a liquid. And we are looking for two liquids. So take away answer A. Salt water. Well, salt is a solid, so take away answer B. Oil is a liquid. Vinegar is a liquid. That would make sense. They are both liquids. Food coloring and water. Why is some Coca-Cola, why is some Fanta green, some Fanta orange? Well, they have food colorings inside of them, chemicals inside of them. Those colorings might be liquids. Now, we have the choice between C and D. C and D both have two liquids, but it does say that they are not dissolved if it is an emulsion. Food coloring, if we think about Fanta, you can get green Fanta, orange Fanta. I mean, the green Fanta is made from pineapples and lemons and oranges. None of that fruit is green, and yet the green Fanta is bright green. That's because of the food coloring that's been added. If you leave the green Fanta on the shelf for a long time, you do not separate. You do not get the green at the top and the clear underneath. No, because the food coloring is dissolved inside of the drink. So D is an example of being dissolved. If we get oil and vinegar dressing, we might put on salad sometime. If you leave it, then the oil might float to the top. I suppose an easier one is to think about oil and water, you can shake it up and it will look like it's mixed. But if you leave the oil and water on the table for 30 minutes, the oil will float to the top and the water will be underneath because they are emulsions. They are two liquids mixed together that are scattered evenly, but over time, because they are not stable, they separate again. So oil and vinegar is the correct answer. Now, I like this question. This is one of the questions that I added in, looking at independent and dependent variables. So the number of eggs in the aquarium, the carbon dioxide pressure, the position of the fish, the temperature of the water. We know that the independent variable is the thing that we change, or the scientist changes. So as we look at the passage, we're looking for something that is changed by the scientist. The dependent variable is something that will be measured, something that will change because of what we do in the experiment. Let's have a look. Dissolved carbon dioxide gas, CO2, creates carbonic acid in the ocean water. Rising ocean acidity levels may harm marine life. Marine life just means water animals. For example, high acid levels may cause hearing loss. Scientists conducted an investigation to study the effect of increased acidity on fish hearing. So, a group of fertilized fish eggs from the same parents were divided into 4 different aquariums, each with a different pressure of CO2. So the eggs were divided. The eggs came from the same parent. They were divided into different tanks. There were 4 tanks, and what was different? Each had a different CO2 pressure, a different carbon dioxide pressure. There was the normal of 390. There was 600 microatmospheres. There was 700 microatmospheres, and there were 900 microatmospheres. The same number of eggs was placed into each aquarium. So the eggs are controlled. Controlled, they come from the same source, the same parents. Controlled because they have the same number. They are controlled. That is not an independent variable. It's the carbon dioxide pressure. The person doing the experiment has changed the pressure of carbon dioxide in each of the 4 tanks, 390, 600, 700, and 900. So, we have taken away this as the independent variable. We've taken away this because it's controlled. Now, we have the position of the fish and the temperature of the water. To prepare for the experiment, 1 fish was placed into an aquarium containing the same CO2 pressure in which it was raised. The fish's position was recorded every 5 seconds for 2 minutes. Then sounds from a predatory fish were played from an underwater speaker at one end of the aquarium at a volume that was only audible to the fish when swimming near the speaker. The fish's position was again recorded every 5 seconds for 2 minutes. The fish's position was recorded. The study showed that fish raised in elevated CO2 levels did not avoid the predator fish. So if the CO2 level was higher, they did not avoid the sound of the fish. So this shows that the recording is the position of the fish. What is being measured, what is being observed and recorded is the position of the fish. There is nothing about temperature of the water, and temperature of the water is something that would probably be controlled. They would not want that to affect the difference based on the CO2 pressure. So that would probably be another controlled variable. Which of the following scientists would be most likely to apply knowledge from the study of both the atmosphere and the hydrosphere to his or her work? Earth science includes the study of the Earth's atmosphere, which is the layer of gases around the Earth, and the Earth's hydrosphere, which is the oceans, rivers, lakes, and groundwater. So a geologist who studies volcanoes and mountain formation, there's nothing about water. An astronomer who studies the planets of the solar system, they are looking beyond the Earth. They're not looking at the Earth's atmosphere, they're looking at space. They're not looking at the Earth's hydrosphere, they're looking at water on other planets. So B would not be looking at either. A meteorologist who studies weather patterns and predicts the weather. Maybe. An ecologist who studies the distribution of populations of organisms. Maybe. Well, if we think about where population of organisms live, some animals live in the water, so an ecologist would need to look at the hydrosphere. Some animals live on land. Even though birds might fly in the sky, they don't live in the sky, they live on the land, they live in the trees. So actually, an ecologist would be studying the hydrosphere and the land, not looking at the atmosphere so much. But a meteorologist who looks at the weather, well, the weather is in the atmosphere, and the weather is linked to the oceans. The currents of the ocean create prevailing winds. The winds create hurricanes. These are all effects on the weather of the Earth. So a meteorologist would need to look at both the hydrosphere and the atmosphere. So C is the correct answer. Earthworms break down large pieces of dead organic matter in the soil. What role do earthworms play in the food chain? Well, producers, they produce their own food. Herbivores, they eat other plants. Carnivores, they eat animals. Omnivores, they eat both plants and animals. But a decomposer gets their nutrients from feeding on dead organisms and returns the nutrients to the soil. The idea of returning the nutrients to the soil is the idea of breaking down. They get their organisms by breaking down the dead bodies of plants and animals. So earthworms are an example of a decomposer. The correct answer is D. Question 21. If the child's parent wanted to decrease the amount of saturated fat in the child's diet, which of the following would be the most effective? Now, suppose a child's diet usually includes 2 servings of cheese, 4 servings of milk. So cheese, cheddar is an example of cheese, so there are 2 servings. And milk is 4 servings. 1 serving of ice cream is 1 serving. 1 serving of ground beef, well, ground beef is 1. And a croissant or bagel is 1. So, which would be more effective? Changing from regular to low-fat cheddar. Well, cheddar is 6. It would go down to 1.2. But that is for the gram per serving. So there would be a reduction of 4.8 per serving. So we need to multiply by 2. And so we get the idea that there would be a 9.6 gram saving. For the milk, well, the milk is 5.1 going down to 1.6. So that would be a saving of 3.5. However, there are 4 servings of milk. So for the milk, we need to multiply by 4. 3.5 multiplied by 4 gives us a saving of 14. The frozen yogurt to the ice cream, well, here we have a saving of 2. And the croissant or bagel, the croissant and bagel is not actually included, From regular to extra lean ground beef, well, that goes from 7.2 down to 5.3. So that gives you a saving of 1.9. We can see that the highest saving is on the milk of 14. So the correct answer would be B, switch from whole milk to 1% milk. The key on this is that you have to see that there are 2 servings, 4 serving, 1 serving. And so after you work out the difference, you have to multiply by the correct number of servings, because you've noticed that this is per serving. Per means for 1. Question 22. Which of the following would decrease the torque as you go through a revolving door? Moving your hand closer to the center, moving your hand closer to the edge, pushing with 2 hands instead of 1, or leaning towards the door as you push to increase your force. Torque is the ability of a force to produce a rotation, a circular motion. The torque of any object is equal to the amount of force multiplied by the distance from the pivot where the force is applied. So we want to decrease the torque. If we move our hand closer to the center, then the distance will be decreased. So that would decrease the torque. Imagine that the force we put in is 10, and before, if this is the door, if we were on the edge of the door and we had a distance of 2, then the torque would be 10 times 2, which equals 20. If we move closer to the center, so we have a distance of 1, the force would remain the same, but the distance is now 1, so the torque would be 10. So moving closer to the center decreases the distance. Decreasing the distance would also decrease the torque. The opposite is for B. If you're going to the outer edge, then you increase the distance. If you increase the distance, you would increase this number, so you would increase the total. If you push with 2 hands instead of 1, then you would double the force. So C would be increasing the total. And then D, you are increasing your force because you are leaning with your body, not just using your hand. You are putting in more force, so you will get out more torque. B, C, and D all increase the torque. Only A would decrease the torque. 23. Of the 4 energy sources, which 2 are most similar in the proportion of energy supply in the United States? Well, this is quite easy. This one is about a quarter. This one is also about a quarter. If we were to do like this and do like this, we could say that if we would divide this into 6, then this would be 1/6. So it is not going to be this one and this one. This one is very big. This one is going to be very small. It's going to be the 2 that are the most similar in size. So we're looking at natural gas and coal and peat. Coal and peat and natural gas, the answer is A. In 1620, the eastern half of the United States was covered by virgin forest. And we can see that through this here. All of this area was virgin forest. The virgin forest is forest that had never been cut down. Many parts of this region today are covered by second growth forest, the ecosystem that eventually grows back after farmland is abandoned. Which of the following conclusions is supported by the graph and the map? Sorry, by the paragraph and the map. The western half of the United States had far less forest cover in 1620 than the eastern half. Well, if we look at our map, we only have the east. We do not have any information about the West, so this is not supported. B, as the European Americans moved from the East Coast to the West, between 1620 and 1850, they cut down forests to build farmland. Well, by 1850, the area of forest had become smaller. By 1990, the areas are tiny. That would look possible. That would be an explanation for why the virgin forest area is getting smaller and smaller. See, a number of relatively large areas of virgin forest remain today. Today, a lot of areas remain. Today, we only have these small areas here, here, and here. We don't have many areas. Sorry, not this one. This is 1850. This one here, if I just change the color, this one here, maybe this one here, and this one here. These are the only areas that link to 1990 today. So there are very few areas, very small areas. C is false. D, today, second-growth forests in the East United States have fewer species of plants and animals than the virgin forest did. We don't know. We are not told how many species of plants. We're not told how many species of animals. We're just not given any of this information. So this is not supported. B would be supported. In the beginning, there were large areas of virgin forest, but by 1850, these areas had been cut down. An example or an explanation for that would be that between 1620 and 1850, the areas were cut down. We also know that there is second growth forest because the farmland has been abandoned. So we can get the idea from the paragraph that the reason these areas were cut down is because the settlers from Europe wanted to have farmland. That is why the correct answer is B. Which portion of the Earth is tilted towards the Sun on June 21? So June 21 is here. I think we can see that this part of the Earth is tilting towards the Sun. This part of the Earth is tilting away from the Sun. So it is the Northern Hemisphere. The correct answer is B. In the passage, don't get confused. In the passage, it says on December 21, the Southern Hemisphere is tilted towards the Sun. So by December 21, the North is tilting away and the South is tilting towards. But the question does not ask you about December 21. The question asks you about June 21. So you have to look at the opposite side of the graph. Which of the following statements is supported by information in the diagram? The Earth rotates once around its axis each and every day. Well, we do know that that is true. But is there anything about day and night? We have spring beginning in the Northern Hemisphere, summer in the Northern Hemisphere, winter in the Southern Hemisphere, fall, spring, summer, winter, fall. We have nothing about day and night. We have about different times of the year. We have about December. We have nothing about day and night. That is not supported by the diagram. B, when it is summer in the Northern Hemisphere, it is summer in the Southern Hemisphere. Well, we need to look at this section here. When the summer begins in the north, the winter begins in the south. So B is false. They do not both have the same seasons. They have opposite seasons. C, on March 21, so we're looking at this section here. On March 21, the Northern Hemisphere is tilted towards the Sun. No. In June, the Northern Hemisphere is tilted towards the Sun. In December, it is tilted away from the Sun. In March and September, it is neither tilted towards or away from the Sun. So that is also false. D. On the first day of spring and fall, neither the northern hemisphere nor the southern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun. So we have here, we have spring in the north and fall in the south, and as the sunlight goes, it hits the north or the south directly. It's June and December when the north and south are tilting away or towards the sun. D is the correct answer. Question 27. Which of the following statements is a conclusion based on the given facts? When we're looking for conclusions, we want to take away any answer that is not supported, any answer that is false, and any answer that is too small, that would be a detail and not a conclusion. A quadrant is a tool used by ecologists. A quadrant is a frame about a meter square. To use a quadrant, the ecologist places it on the ground. A quadrant makes the plant distribution estimates more reliable. So ecologists use a tool called a quadrant. This is answer A. When doing field studies of plant distribution, a quadrant is an open four-sided structure about a meter square. This is answer B. It is placed on the ground. This is answer C. So the first three sentences match answers A, B, and C. But these all seem to be details describing using a quadrant. We need the conclusion. So a quadrant is placed on the ground, whether in a meadow or on a hillside or at the beach. The ecologist then counts the plants of different species inside the quadrant. By using a quadrant, an ecologist can get a more accurate understanding of the species distribution than by doing a random count. So the reason for using a quadrant is to make more accurate. So more accurate might be more reliable. And the estimate, well, to get an understanding would be getting an estimate. D would be a conclusion. A, B, and C are details. D is the conclusion. Question number 28. According to Charles's law, when the pressure of a gas remains constant, the volume of the quantity of gas varies directly with temperature. So the volume of the gas varies directly with the temperature. In other words, there is a positive correlation between the temperature of the gas and the volume of the gas. So we are looking at the temperature and the volume. So we have temperature and volume. We have volume and temperature. We have temperature and volume. And then we have pressure and volume. But the pressure is remaining constant. The pressure is not changing. So we can take away answer D. Then we're told that there is a direct change. Direct change would either go up or they would go down. This one is not directly changing. It's going up and down in a bell-shaped curve. So take away C. We're told that the correlation is positive. And positive is when they both increase. So the correct answer is A. B would be a negative correlation. As one increases, as the volume increases, the temperature decreases. Sorry, as the temperature increases, the volume decreases. So B shows one going up and one going down. That is negative. A, as the temperature goes up, the volume also goes up. Question 29. At the beginning of the 20th century, only 3 subatomic particles were known: protons, neutrons, and electrons. In the last half of the century, dozens of new particles were discovered using new technology. Machines, called particle accelerators, push particles to tremendous, that means very quick speeds. When two particles collide at high speed, they annihilate each other, destroy each other, and new particles are formed. Which of the following is not stated in this passage? Which of the following is not stated? Protons, neutrons, and electrons are subatomic particles. Well, only 3 subatomic particles were known: protons, neutrons, and electrons. A is stated, so it cannot be the correct answer. Atoms are composed of subatomic particles. So subatomic particles, it doesn't say that they are made from these things. So maybe B. C, in particle accelerators, particles are pushed to very high speeds. So we have particle accelerators push the particles to tremendous, very high speed. This is stated directly in the passage, so C cannot be correct. D, particles that collide at high speed annihilate each other, forming new particles. When they, if you look at the last sentence, when they collide at high speed, they annihilate each other and new particles are formed. So answer D is also stated directly in the passage. This means that the correct answer for this question is B. Although that we can assume that atoms are made of subatomic particles, I mean subatomic would be under the atom, so we can assume it by thinking about what the words mean. It is not stated directly in the passage. Question 30. Why was the density that the student calculated inaccurate? Well, firstly, we need to know how to calculate the density, and then we need to know what did the student do. So density is the amount of matter or mass in a given volume of a substance. To find, this is important, to find the density of an object, you divide the mass by the volume. You divide the mass by the volume. So density is equal to the mass divided by the volume. A student wanted to find the density of a 3 centimeter cube of lead. First, she used a scale to find the mass of the cube. So she gets the mass. That's good. Next, she calculated the volume by multiplying the 3 by 3 by 3. The 3 centimeter cube, so we have a cube, and a cube has the same size on each side. So it would be 3 wide, 3 long, and 3 high. So this is correct. Finally, she divided the volume by the mass. We are told that we need to divide the mass by the volume, but the student made a mistake. The student switched the volume and the mass around. So the student is not accurate. The scale can be used to find the mass, so A is not correct. Multiplying the 3 sides of the cube does give the volume, so B is not correct. The student should have found the volume first. Well, it doesn't matter. You get the volume, you get the mass, and then you perform the calculation. The correct answer is it should be divide the mass by the volume, not divide the volume by the mass. So D is correct. Now this is another question that's looking at experimental technique. Which of the following is not true? Their hypothesized result for the offspring is accurate. The plan appears to be free from any error in sampling. 10 male and 10 female is enough for a statistical sample. They should continue the cross with the next generation to confirm the heterozygous genotype. The plan appears to be free from error in material and procedure. So Miguel and Anna have set up an experiment to test a hypothesis that a dihybrid cross made by pairing male flies that were homozygous for vestigial wings and rosy eyes with female flies that were homozygous for wild type wings and wild type eyes would result in an F1 generation that were all heterozygotic, although each would be wild in phenotype. So they will cross 10 males and 10 females. Well, we know that if we have one that is dominant and one that is female. If these are homozygotic recessive and homozygotic dominant, when we cross them, we will get offspring that are all heterozygotic. So if they are homozygotic parents for different features, different alleles, then when they have offspring, all the offspring will get one allele from each type. So all the offspring will be heterozygotic. So A is definitely true. Should they continue with the next generation? Well, we also know that sometimes what we think are homozygotic dominant might actually be heterozygotic. Sometimes we can make mistakes. We also know that if we match together two parents that are heterozygotic, we will get one that is homozygotic dominant, we will get one that is homozygotic recessive, and we get two heterozygotic. So if we continue with the next F1 generation, this would confirm the genotype is heterozygotic. So this would also be true. It would be good to continue the next generation to confirm what we have. So we need to look at answer B and answer D. The plan appears free from error in sampling. Sampling means how we choose those that will be taking part. In this experiment, there were 10 males and 10 females. And answer B says that is enough for a statistical sample. Statistical sample means that we can trust what we are seeing will always happen. We believe that what we are seeing is not the result of random chance. D, the plan appears to be free in error in material and procedure. Well, the procedure is to test two different homozygotic parents with different alleles. That's a good procedure. And all of the offspring will be heterozygotic. That seems to be good. Choosing male and female is good selection of material. D seems like it is true. The correct answer is B. Having only 10 male and 10 female is not enough for a statistical sample. When we want to prove that something is because it is true, rather than because it is the result of random chance, we need to have a much bigger sample. If they'd had 100 male and 100 female and it happened every time, then we could say that we believe this is factual. But because the sample is small, it could be the result of chance. Question 32. It can be inferred from the passage above that an alloy is a magnetic material, a material that stops electricity, a mixture of metals, or the core of the coin. So when the US Mint had to design a new dollar coin to replace the old Susan B. Anthony dollar, it faced a problem. It wanted to design an appealing, distinctive golden color coin that vending machines would recognize as an Anthony dollar, which looks like a quarter. Vending machines identify coins by their weight, size, and electromagnetic signature. They test a coin by passing electric current through it and measuring the resulting magnetic field. Thus, the new Skagwea dollar had to be similar to the Anthony dollar in size, weight, and electromagnetic signature. They're changing the picture on the front of the coin. And when they're changing the picture on the coin, then the coin still needs to go into machines. If the machine cannot recognize what the coin is, the machine would reject the coin. If they change the coin too much, then they would have to change the software inside all of the machines. And the machines will be looking at the size and the weight and the electromagnetic signature. The size and the weight were easy to imitate, but the electromagnetic signature was not. The Anthony dollar had a copper core covered by silver-colored copper nickel alloy. Now look here. Here's the word alloy. And alloy says copper nickel alloy. Copper is one type of metal and nickel is another type of metal. And together they make an alloy. And later, we have an alloy of manganese, zinc, copper, and nickel. This time there are 4 different types of metal. But both times we have the word alloy, we have a mixture, we have a number of metals that come together. So we can say that an alloy is a mixture of different metals. US Mint could have solved its technical problems with the Sacagawea dollar by making it out of the same metal as the Anthony dollar. Why did the people at the Mint decide against this? The metals in the Anthony dollar were too rare and expensive to use in the new coin, but the old dollar used copper and nickel, and the new dollar also used copper and nickel, but with 2 extra metals added in. So if they were rare, they would have stopped using them. Instead, they are using different mixture of them. B, like nickels, dimes, and quarters, the Anthony dollar was silver colored and therefore not distinctive. Well, they wanted to design an appealing, distinctive golden color coin. So they want to make a golden color coin. The old Anthony dollar was silver in color. The Anthony dollar was silver, but they wanted to make a golden color coin. So the reason they did not use the same metals was because they wanted to change the color. C, the electromagnetic signature of the Anthony coin was not recognized by the vending machines. This is true. The Anthony coin was recognized by the vending machines. This is false. It's the new signature, the Sacagawea dollar, that was not recognized. D, the size and weight of the Anthony coin made it impractical. Well, it says the size and the weight were easy to imitate. Imitate means to look like or to copy. So they did copy the size, they did copy the weight, but they wanted to change the color. And when they changed the color, they changed the metal that it was made from. And changing the metal that it was made from changed the electromagnetic signature. So they caused the problem by changing the color. Marion has little interest in or time for gardening, so she does not have time to spend gardening. Yet, she would like to have flowers in her front yard. Which of the following types of plants would probably give her the most flowers for the least effort? Well, annuals complete their life cycle in one growing season. So that means that every year she would need to plant new ones. B, biennials complete the life cycle in 2 growing seasons, so every 2 years they would need to replant. Tender plants are sensitive to the cold, so they might be annual, biennial, or perennial, but sensitive to the cold means they might die easily. So annual only stays for 1 year, we can take away annual, and tender plants would only be there for the good season. When it gets too cold, they would die, so they would need replacing, so we can take away C. D, hardy plants can withstand the frost. So hardy plants can be left outside in the winter when it's cold. That means there is less work. So hardy is good. And perennials live for years, and the flowers come each year. They live for many years. So the biennial, she would have to change every 2 years. But the perennial, she could keep for many years. So D is the best answer. If the flat mirror were removed, what would happen? Well, the flat mirror is here. So imagine we take out the flat mirror. At the moment, light comes in here. It goes down here. It hits the curved mirror, and then it hits the flat mirror. But if the flat mirror was taken away, then the light would just continue to go in a straight line. There would be nothing to direct the light upwards. The light goes upwards to the eyepiece because it hits the flat mirror. But if there is no flat mirror, it does not go to the eyepiece. Light would come in, hit the curved mirror, and go out again, from the top or the bottom. Nothing would go to the eyepiece, so nothing would be seen. So the correct answer is going to be C. The viewer would not be able to see anything because there would be no light. The light could still go into the telescope, so A is wrong. They can still reflect off the curved mirror, that's no problem, so B is wrong. And seeing those that are in focus, it's not about being in focus, but if no light comes to where you are looking, it would be like looking outside at nighttime when there is no moon and no electric, you will see nothing. 37. What is the main reason that computers are now being used in the drug discovery process? They enable scientists to abandon the trial and error methods. They help scientists to analyze large amounts of data in a systematic way. They make the experiment unnecessary, or they make the clinical trial unnecessary. An experiment is something that you do in a laboratory, maybe in a university or a hospital. A clinical trial is like what's been happening recently. If you go back a year with the COVID-19 vaccinations, there were clinical trials. Those trials were done on 30, 40, 50,000 people to see what would happen. Would they get better or not? Would they get sick or not? The trials were done first before the governments allowed the vaccines to be given to the wider population. Now let's look at the passage. The discovery of a new drug was once largely the result of trial and error, laboratory experiments and clinical trials. So trial and error, laboratory experiments and clinical trials all happened in the past. Although these methods are still used, all of these methods are still used. So answer A, where it says abandon the trial and error method, they are still used. Laboratory experiments are necessary? No, they're still used. Clinical trials, they're still used. So we can take away answer A, C, and D. We only have answer B left. Computer science is applied to the drug discovery process to refine it and to speed it up, to make it quicker. Why? Because they can analyze genetic material. They can look at a lot of material. They can analyze data. And so the key word there is analyze. Computers are being used to analyze data, to make the process more quick. The result of trial and error is still there. Laboratory experiments are still there. Clinical trials are still there. But to make the whole thing quicker, computers are used to do the analysis. On to question 37. People planning to visit tropical countries may need to be vaccinated against diseases. For example, 2 to 4 weeks before a trip, travelers should be vaccinated against typhoid fever. The vaccine is 50 to 80% effective. Additional precautions against typhoid fever include avoiding food and water that may be dirty. If a traveler is vaccinated against typhoid fever 2 to 4 weeks before a brief trip to the tropics, which of the following best explains why he or she should take extra precautions against contracting the disease? Well, if it happened only 2 to 4 weeks before, that is correct, 2 weeks before. So effective for only a few months, well, if it was vaccinated 2 to 4 weeks before, they would still be vaccinated for the next 2 to 3 months. So this does not make sense. If the vaccination is only 50 to 80% effective, means it works 50 to 80% of the time. Between 20 and 50% of the time, it does not work. So because it doesn't work all of the time, other things also need to be done, such as avoiding dirty water and making sure that you eat in a clean place. So B is the correct answer. We have to take these extra precautions because the vaccination is not 100% effective. Causing fever, headache, these would be called side effects, but they are not reasons why you would have to take other precautions. And typhoid fever spreading only through the air and water is not explaining why you have to take extra precautions. A precaution means something that you do to try and prevent a negative thing happening. And on to the final question. Suppose that you notice your right knee hurts when you play softball. You suspect that one of the movements involved in playing the sport is causing the issue, but you don't know which one. You decide to do a scientific investigation to find out. So, you make a hypothesis. This means to guess. You design, you plan a test. You collect data, you do the experiment, and you record. You record what you see. Then you form a conclusion by doing analysis. You look at what you recorded. So, based on the data that you collected, data has already been collected. This is finished. You think it is likely that stopping suddenly after running a short distance is indeed the cause of pain in your knee. Now, because this is based on the data, and in fact, based on the data matches the idea of based on the data. Based on the data you collected is in the past tense. You already finished collecting the data. Well, making a conclusion is after you finish collecting the data. Next, you make a list of each of the movements involved in softball. In the off-season, you plan to perform each movement several times without performing the others. You're making a plan. You're making a list of the different movements that you need to do, and you make a plan to do them one by one. The key word here is designing, planning. You are planning to perform each one several times. This is how many times that you will do. This is the design of the experiment. Based on your experience, you make a guess. Now, making a guess is making a hypothesis. So you make a guess about which of the movements involved puts the greatest stress on your knees. You think it might be suddenly stopping running after a short distance, but you make a guess. A hypothesis is a prediction. It's a guess. So we can match the idea of the hypothesis with the idea of making a guess. So finally, after performing each movement in isolation, you record how your knee feels. You collect data. You record how it feels. So because you are recording, you are collecting the data. So the idea of recording how you feel is the idea of collecting the data. And you do each type of test one by one, each type of movement one by one, so that you can record information for each type of movement. Now, I have added these few questions in about scientific method, dependent and independent variables. They were not in the original test, but there is an emphasis. If you look at the practice questions and you look at the material online, there is an emphasis in this new GED on the idea of scientific method, finding errors in an experiment, and identifying variables. So we need to continue to practice these types of questions. And in the last few exams, I will be adding a few more questions like these. That's the end of this video. Make sure that you are understanding everything. You can always send me a message if you don't, before you go to the next practice exam. O să lăsai, Codea.